David, I mean, what do you make of these visits to the White House from a Parkinson specialist?
Well, I don't know what to make of it. I will say this, Anderson. I don't believe the president has Parkinson's disease. They say he doesn't, that he's not being treated for that. I think it would be irresponsible to run if he were being treated for that. I don't. I have no question in my mind about that. But questions are going to be raised if you're not simple and direct and about these kinds of issues. It was predictable that people would have curiosity about why this doctor was there, given the issues that were raised by the president's debate performance and the fact that the press secretary didn't have direct answers to those questions only intensifies the hunt for answers. The media is going to not take her non-answers at face value at this point. Members of Congress who are trying to decide what to do here and whether they should take a position on the president's candidacy are probably going to want to know before they do, well, what is this all about? And I think you can be very sure that the House Republicans are going to treat this like a ball of wool. And I think at this point, they need to be very, very direct on all these questions, or they're going to continue to get more questions, and it's going to propagate more trouble for the president. They need to jump on this issue, and they need to be clear and direct about it.
Kate, I mean, if there was no issue with President Biden's cognition and his ability to speak without a teleprompter and answer questions, why wouldn't the White House, I mean, to David's point, have a press conference and just let the president answer questions from reporters?
Well, he's going to do that this week. We know he's going to do that on Thursday, so we will see him. We'll see him doing that there. And I would also say, in listening to Karine today, which, by the way, the White House press secretary has an incredibly difficult job, and anybody who's worked in White House communications can tell you that there are a lot of factors that go into what you make public. It's often the role of the White House press secretary, the White House communications director, to advocate to others internally in the building to make information public. And sometimes you get pushback based on what the lawyers think or, what the legislative team thinks. So, I have to imagine there was a robust conversation about this inside the White House today. And I think if you look at what Karine said, she answered a number of these questions directly. She said he's not being treated for Parkinson's. He's not taking medicine for Parkinson's. And the White House has put out
but they're never talking about dementia or, I mean, the more obvious things, which is what the subtext of all of this is, isn't it?
Well, but they put out a detailed medical analysis of the president every year in which the neurologist says there's no evidence of any of these issues. But I would also say,
well, he actually just said Parkinson's or MS. He actually didn't specifically say anything about dementia or any kind of form of dementia. But
well, he said in the section of the report, he says no reason to be concerned about neurological. I think he uses the word deficiencies, but they have put this out annually every single year. It is dramatically more detailed than, as the doctor was mentioning, than Donald Trump has. Right. But the other thing I would say is the White House medical unit, and again, anybody who's worked at the White House knows this, Axe, Ashley, Paul could all speak to this too. The medical unit is a doctor's office that treats all of the staff. If you have a cold when you're at the White House and you're a staffer, you go to the medical unit. There are a rotation of doctors who come in, who are there to be available to staff. They don't just treat the president. And so, I think the desire to jump to conclusions here when the press secretary was clear that he's not being treated for Parkinson's, I think is problematic. I would also note, if you overlay the president's schedule, and I haven't had a chance to do all of this, but if you overlay the president's schedule, you'll see there were times in those visitors' logs where the doctor was there, the president was out of the country. So I think, look, I understand that people have these questions. I certainly agree with Axe that the White House needs to be clear. I think that the press secretary did the best job she could do today with the information that she was allowed to share. But I don't think there's any reason to believe that the president's being treated for Parkinson's.
Okay. Paul, I mean, nobody can explain or has offered any explanation for the debate for performance other than a bad night. And the president has said, I was tired from international trips, even though it was, more than 10 days or so after his last international trip. I mean, nobody has spoken to why some sentences are totally fine and make total sense, and others, like on Morning Joe, trail off into just kind of a word salad. Do they need to answer that question?
Well, they do. The question was best posed by Nancy Pelosi, not exactly a MAGA Trumper. Speaker Emerita Pelosi said that, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the exact quote, but she said, we want to know if this was just a bad night or if there's a condition. Now, that's Nancy Pelosi. She's not exactly a Biden hater, and she's spent more time with President Biden than most people have. My own advice to these folks, and they're my friends, and I love them, and I love this president. He's really a wonderful man. He's done great things for the country. But they've got to be more transparent. They need to listen to Dr. Reiner. You know, nobody wants their medical records released in public. But you know what? He's got his finger on the button. He's got 5,000 nuclear weapons. He's got 1 million troops under arms under his command. And Mr. Jefferson said this, our third president, when a person assumes a public office, they become public property. So I think both candidates, both Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, should waive doctor-patient confidentiality and send their personal physicians out to, say, Sanjay Gupta, right? Because a political reporter is not going to know the right questions. But we should have more transparency about both of these guys, because I think there are really important questions about each of them.
Ashley, I mean, a number of senators are voicing concerns about the president's candidacy tonight. What more would you like to see him to do to try to address these issues?
Well, you know, I've been on the phone all day with rank and file members as well as members of leadership in the House. And essentially what I'm hearing, Anderson, is the message is that stopping the bleeding doesn't solve the problem. You know, what they've said to me is that if we accept the president's word that it's episodic and not a condition, then we should all anticipate that there's going to be another episode. And so the fear is that, you know, that the episode is much more profound, comes at a much more consequential time, and also comes at a point in which we've run out the clock and there's no options left to solve the problem. So that's what I'm hearing from members. I'm also hearing that they were not satisfied with the president's explanation because many of them have seen them in their districts and they've seen him perform. They weren't satisfied by this letter that he sent over today. They feel like they need to touch and feel the president. So, I mean, the overwhelming message I'm hearing from members is that, you know, is that they're feeling like sitting ducks waiting for the next shoe to drop. But they're holding out some level of patience and giving the president some time.
David, I mean, let's talk about time. You know, obviously he seems determined and defiant and thinks he can do this. As long as he feels that, how does anything change?
Well, I mean, this has always been the case. It has always been his decision. You know, what he said in that interview was that he didn't expect the leaders of the House and Senate to come to him and say, you're jeopardizing us and our members, and, you know, that you don't want this to be your legacy. He said, oh, that's not going to happen. They're all with me. And if they don't, I don't know what else would intervene. I don't think God Almighty is going to play a role here. It really has to be the leaders of the Congress. That letter he sent over this morning was pretty dismissive. I mean, there was no real acknowledgement of the concerns or addressing of the concerns that people had. He basically said, I'm done talking about it. I'm running, live with it. And here's my case against Donald Trump. And, you know, that, as Ashley said, that didn't really resolve the fundamental questions. So I do think he's trying to run out the clock. I think he very much expects to be the nominee. He has NATO this week. The Republican convention is next week. And then time gets very short if you were to make a change. The only thing I would say that he should consider is, and I've said this from the beginning, can he make a straight-faced case to the American people as to why they shouldn't be concerned about this and why he is the best candidate for the next 4 years? We can honor the president's achievements for the last 4 years and the last 50 years of his public service, which is distinguished, important. I think what he's done as president in many ways has been historic, but that doesn't address his ability to do this for another 4 years. And he seems unable to address that.
Yeah, everyone, thank you.